Quick black facts about Malcolm X. Born May 19, 1925 in Omaha, Nebraska. While an infant, Malcolm's family moved to Lansing, Michigan. At the age of 6, his father, a Baptist minister and former supporter of the early black nationalist leader Marcus Garvey, died after being hit by a streetcar, possibly the murder victim of white supremacy. After his father's death, his family was poor and his mother had to cook dandelion greens from the street to feed her kids. After she was put in an insane asylum in 1939, Malcolm and his siblings had to stay in foster homes or live with family. Although he was an excellent student, Malcolm dropped out of school in the 8th grade because of the racial discrimination he faced from teachers. As a rebellious youngster, Malcolm moved from the Michigan State Detention to the Roxbury section of Boston, where he became involved in petty criminal crimes. Known as Dirty Red for his hair, he developed into a street hustler, drug dealer, and leader of a gang of thieves in Roxbury and Harlem, New York. In 1946, he went to jail on charges of burglary. While serving a 10-year sentence in prison for burglary, Malcolm became committed to his education. He found out about the Nation of Islam and converted. The Nation combines elements from black nationalism and traditional Islam. Malcolm quit smoking, gambling, and refused to eat pork because of the Nation's dietary restrictions. In order to educate himself, he spent long hours reading books in the prison library, even memorizing a dictionary. He also sharpened his skills by participating in debate classes. Following Nation tradition, he replaced his surname Little with the X, a custom among Nation of Islam followers who considered their family names to have originated with white slaveholders. After he got out of prison, Malcolm helped lead the nation during the period of its greatest growth and influence. He met Elijah Muhammad in Chicago in 1952 and then began organizing temples in New York, Philadelphia, Boston, and cities in the South. He founded the nation's newspaper, Muhammad Speaks, which he printed in the basement of his home, and initiated the practice of requiring every male member of the nation to sell an assigned number of newspapers on the street as a recruiting and fundraising technique. He also articulated the nation's racial doctrines on the inherent evil of whites and the natural superiority of blacks. Malcolm rose to become the minister of Boston Temple No. 11, which he founded. Later, he was rewarded with the post of Minister Temple No. 7 in Harlem, the largest and most prestigious temple in the nation after the Chicago headquarters. Recognizing his talent and ability, Elijah Muhammad, who had a special affection for Malcolm, named him the national representative of the Nation of Islam, second in rank to Muhammad himself. Under Malcolm's lieutenancy, the nation claimed a membership of 500,000. An articulate public speaker, Malcolm expressed the pent-up anger, frustration, and bitterness of African Americans during the major phase of the civil rights movement from 1955 to 1965. He preached on the streets of Harlem and spoke at major universities like Harvard. He criticized the mainstream civil rights movement, challenging Martin Luther King Jr.'s central notion of integration and nonviolence. Malcolm argued that more was at stake than the civil right to sit in a restaurant or even to vote. The most important issues were black identity, integrity, and independence. In contrast to King's strategy of nonviolence, civil disobedience, and vindictive suffering, Malcolm urged his followers to defend themselves by any means necessary. In 1963, it was deep tension between Malcolm and Elijah Muhammad. Malcolm urged that the nation became more active in the widespread civil rights protests instead of just being a critic on the sidelines. Muhammad's violation of the moral code of the nation further worsened his relations with Malcolm, who was devastated when he learned that Muhammad had fathered children by 6 of his personal secretaries, 2 of whom filed paternity suits and made the issue public. Malcolm brought additional bad publicity to the nation when he declared publicly that President John F. Kennedy's assassination was an example of chickens coming home to roost. Elijah Muhammad ordered Malcolm to observe a 90-day period of silence, and the break between the two leaders became permanent. Malcolm left the nation in 1964 and founded Muslim Mosque, Inc. During his pilgrimage to Mecca that same year, he experienced a second conversion and embraced Sunni Islam. Adopting the Muslim name, El-Hajj Malik el-Shabazz. Renouncing the separatist beliefs of the nation, he claimed that the solution to racial problems in the United States lay in Orthodox Islam. He addressed the Organization of African Unity, an intergovernmental group established to promote African unity, international cooperation, and economic development. In 1965, he founded the Organization of Afro-American Unity as a secular vehicle to internalize the plight of Black Americans and to make common causes with the people of the developing world, to move from civil rights to human rights. The growing hostility between Malcolm and the nation led to death threats and violence. Malcolm X was assassinated on February 21st, 1965 at the Audubon Ballroom in Harlem, New York. 3 members of the Nation of Islam, the religious group to which he had once belonged, were convicted of his murder. 3 members of the Nation of Islam, the religious group to which he once had belonged, were convicted of his murders. 2 were exonerated in 2021. Malcolm was survived by his wife, Betty Shabazz, whom he married in 1958, and 6 daughters.